it doesn't mean that everything is like fairy floss and sparkles. I went into that decision knowing that I was going to have to give up certain ideas of what I thought or felt was fair.
What do you actually give up to keep divorce amicable, legally and emotionally? Because staying respectful when you'd be entitled to be furious, staying flexible when you're entitled to dig in, that costs something. Nobody talks about the cost. They just admire the outcome. I'm Iman Ibrahim. I spent 19 years as a family lawyer in Singapore and England and Wales. This is Divorce Actually, where we talk about what actually helps when you don't need more legal advice or more emotional processing. The decision-making, preparation, communication, and negotiation that actually moves you forward. This one today is a juicy two-part story, and today we hear from her side. Pudding Ibrahim went through a divorce by mutual agreement with her ex-husband. There was no court battle. How many of you out there want that? And I will be speaking to him in a separate episode. Today, I want to hear it from her because two people can go through the exact same process and carry it very different things out of it. Pudding, welcome. In case anyone didn't notice that Pudding Ibrahim and Iman Ibrahim have the same surname, it is because I have roped my sister into this episode. I think divorce is often a very difficult thing to talk about. And I called in some birthday favors. So thank you very much for coming on board and sharing with us what it was
Excited to be
like.
here. Yeah.
So I have my questions. Yep. So I'm going to say the context here, which is that most divorce content, even my content, is oriented around high conflict situations. I mean, I am a high conflict specialist, and that is where a lot of pain lives, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And this episode is a departure from that because I want to show people out there what a really true amicable divorce looks like, and that it's achievable. Because a lot of people come to me and say, Iman, I would love to have an amicable divorce. But the truth is, when I talk to them, they're not quite there yet. I think there are a lot of elements that need to be in place, which you achieved. So you're going to share that with us. If we put it out there, maybe more people will realize what they need to do, where they need to get to, and maybe even what they need to give up to get to where you got. Yeah. So let's first talk a little bit about where you are in all of this. You are now almost 2 years out of filing for divorce.
Yeah. Yep. I would say actually, I remember September of 2024 being when we submitted everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before that, you had a period of time where you were negotiating.
Yeah. I would say for the 9 months prior to that, it was very much, I would say, the transition period of when, we decided that that was going to be the path that we were going to take, and to literally the day that we filed everything and then it's out of your hands, I think, for us, that was about 6 months before the final ruling came through.
Okay.
But basically, that's hands off, just waiting time. So that first 9 months, which I now think quite ironic, 9 months to birth this new chapter, was where it was probably the hardest, I would have to say. Yeah.
And I want to sort of pick up on what you say about 9 months, because I think a lot of people also think that I've decided I'm going to have an amicable divorce, and that means we can sign everything tomorrow and we'll be done and on my way with it by the end of the month.
Is that what people think? How are people thinking that? Come on, guys.
Well, exactly. I mean, they want to know how to convince the other person, for example, to have that. And we will get into that for sure.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the first question I have for you is this. When did you know that you were going to have a mutual agreement divorce?
Yeah, I guess if I'm being really honest, the point at which this decision came to fruition. It was, I think, something that had been under the surface for a while. And it was not pleasant when the decision was made. And I think in the aftermath of that, when all the emotions are running high and when there is a lot of conflict, and also to add context, we share a child who at the time was very young. She was about 4 years old. And to navigate that whole emotional scape, also having to parent a very young child, I think for me, honestly, what it came down to was being very honest with myself, as honest as I could be in that moment, to ask myself, based on everything I know about this situation and the other person that's involved in this, and how I need to show up in the world, right, as I navigate this and where I want to go and what's important to me in terms of my time and my energy, I realized that I think in our scenario, the two big things that I could sense would be points of contention were finances and parenting, specifically with regards to the custody, right? Yeah. And so for me, I just kind of knew that we could fight to the death on those two things. Right?
I want you to know you're not the only one who could fight to the death on the money and children are like the top
two levers. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, right? Because I think when you're coming out of a situation like this, and this is a life that you've built with someone, that you've shared with someone, and clearly, obviously, if you've, created a child together, they are very emotional things, right? And they are key things, I think, in a lot of people's relationships, right, in this point. And so going back to your question, I would say it wasn't something I decided right away. I think in that first 2 to 3 months when everything was happening, and trust me when I say, anyone who's going through the process, it is all over the place. Like you're being pulled in all sorts of different directions. I think I made the decision of just knowing that, one, I didn't really personally have the finances, nor really want to put endless finances into what I anticipated was going to be a very long, arduous legal battle if I chose to really, really fight for what I think is fair, right? And I guess we can go back to that, right? The whole idea of fairness. And the second part to that was when it came to parenting our child and knowing that at that very young age, how I wanted to show up for her as a parent in spite of going through all of this, and whether I felt like I actually had the capacity to be able to do like a very intense, emotionally draining, financially draining, legal battle, and whether I could parent in the way that I really wanted to try and show up as best as I could. And so once I kind of sat down and thought about that, it kind of became clearer to me. And then also kind of having some communication, in a very, very limited form with my daughter's dad, who was also equally, I would say, going through this in his version. It really kind of became a no-brainer to me that actually, yes, I would rather try and settle this as quickly as possible, but also knowing that has sacrifices to it, right? An amicable divorce or a mutual, what's it called? A
mutual agreement.
Correct.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that everything is like fairy floss and sparkles. I went into that decision knowing that I was going to have to give up certain ideas of what I thought or felt was fair in order to have other benefits, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, as you go through this, and there's so much in it.
Yeah.
What I'm really picking up on is that you had you reflected on this entire situation, which in itself is not even easy.
It's not easy. We're talking very fleeting moments because it's such an emotional,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just very
It's a
intense.
lot. It's a lot. And with that reflection, you were able to distill what was really the most important to you.
Yeah.
And it is different things. Different things
For
are
everyone.
different for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
We will hear from him what he felt was the most important. But what I'm hearing from you is your priority is your daughter.
Yeah.
And making sure that you are able to be present for her.
Yes.
And be as best a parent that you can be to her through this time. And that to you meant that you would want this to go more quickly.
Yes.
And there is always a trade-off between having it go quicker and having what you think is right, what you think is fair.
Yeah.
But okay. So for all of that, your North Star is your daughter.
I would say it's actually twofold because yes, I knew that trying to show up as a parent for her in all of the ways, right? Absolutely a priority. But I also know just from my own growth work, I think, which let me just say, the whole divorce process has been like in the last 3 years, a lot of growth work because I've tried to look at it in that form, and that's been really helpful. But it was also for myself because we can be self-sacrificial and try and do the best for other people, but we cannot serve, your child or, what you have to do if you are also not doing well. So it was twofold. It was knowing my own capacity and where I was at that point and where I could possibly be if I went down this particular path.
Yeah.
And choosing to sacrifice based on the fact that I would not be healthy emotionally, mentally, physically, and that would affect me parenting my child. But I also had to be important in that equation. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense.
It's not just about the kid, because I feel like if you're focusing on the kid or kids, for people who have multiple children, and you're forgetting and neglecting your own needs, that shows up in parenting, in various ways. So to me, it's twofold. It's yourself and then, the parenting part.
Well, I would actually say that it is absolutely important to keep yourself steady.
Yes.
I'm going to call it steady.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just, if you're unsteady, it doesn't just show up in parenting. Actually, it shows up in all aspects, including the decisions you are going to make in this very high stakes situation.
Yeah.
But and I know that we're going to talk about capacity as we go through this.
Yeah.
But walk me through how you decided your process was going to be, because I think that the listeners or viewers will want to know, how does an amicable divorce get structured?
From what I remember, and again, because there was so much going on, I think, kind of 2 or 3 or 4 months in, it was still very much, I think first it was the logistics around our kid, right? And making sure that we had set up something around that and getting used to that. And that honestly was probably the most challenging part for me initially, because from an emotional standpoint, that was very, very difficult. And then in the meantime, the other person has to also agree that this is the part, this is the path that we're going to go down. And when you're in a situation where you have already struggled to communicate with the other person, and it feels like now this thing has happened and then we're transitioning and nobody can communicate with anyone, it feels like very difficult to bridge that gap about, okay, what is the plan? So I don't want to gloss over that and be like, oh, it was really simple and we all just agreed and we're going to do it. It was, at times I had to use a mediator, who was a neutral party to both of us, I would say, to communicate, hey, there's this other way. And of course, I also have to say, because you're my sister, I did ask you a little bit of background on what the options were, but then communicating that through a neutral party at times or directly with him to be like, there's this option. It will require us to do these things. What are your thoughts? Kind of checking back that way. So it wasn't really something that flowed very easily. I want to make that really clear because communication was very difficult at that point. But I think because I made the decision to not fight over certain things, that kind of helped to facilitate that process, I guess. So those were kind of like the drivers. And yeah, from that point, it was quite straightforward. I would say the hardest part to that, like the easy part was deciding, okay, yes, we both agree that we don't want to spend a ton of money on this process. We both agree that we want it to move fairly quickly. It's the negotiating of the terms, I think, that people find the most pain with. And as I spoke to more divorced women, not yesterday, last year, as I went through this process, I would see them as having gone through, because last year was my first year that kind of the divorce was final and, I didn't have to do any of that stuff anymore. But anytime I see or speak to a woman who is going through that part, like the negotiating terms part, I mean, honestly, just the worst time. There's no other way to say it. But that is the time where you really have to dig deep and you have to call in all of your resources, physically, emotionally, mentally, physically, in the terms of people around you, I think. That's when I would say, you talk about an amicable divorce, get a mediator, because you are so incapable at that point of like the communication part of it. I would say hands down, it is the hardest time to communicate with somebody that, for most people, I think going through this situation already had issues communicating with. It goes both ways. And now it's even more high stakes because you're now trying to do it amicably or negotiate these terms by yourself. Of course, you can get a third party in to help you with that. It just incurs more cost. But the communication part of that, I would say, is the most painful.
So I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is negotiation and even communication through conflict is not something we're taught in school.
No.
And for sure, for my divorce coaching clients, that's also something that's very challenging. And people then decide to deploy usually a lawyer actually to do their negotiating and communication for them. And you're right.
Yeah.
It adds up in price. And what you did was you had a negotiator.
Yeah.
Was someone that you both trusted.
Yep.
Who was able to do the negotiation on your behalf.
Yeah. When it got really intense.
So they were the person in between the two of you who would, for example, I mean, tell me if this is wrong as I describe it.
Yeah.
But for example, there would be an issue or a point that needed to have both your agreement on or proposals on.
Yeah.
So they would go, okay, Pudding, tell me what it is, and then I will take the proposal to the other side.
Yeah.
And then they went to the other side,
Yeah.
spoke to the other side for you,
Yeah.
and then brought the any amendments or proposal.
Yeah, I would say it definitely was like that, particularly particularly when we were trying to negotiate the things that I think, like what I mentioned, right, the most important, I think for us, it ended up being our child, right, and how to literally down to the letter negotiate like those terms. Let's just say there were a lot of Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google like everything going on. It's so unsexy, but like,
what do you mean by that?
Like, as in, overall, I think how we tried to do it to also minimize, because we realized that especially during this time, I think we had issues before about communication, right? Which I think is quite common. But even more so during this time, and then you add in all the emotions and like, all of that stuff, it doesn't make for good communication to begin with. So I think then trying to think like, how can we create more neutral terms, right? Less back and forth, like have everything kind of, like how can we just not get so entangled in it? So starting like a Google Sheet, right? Literally, or a Google Docs form to like start with the terms or to put things on there, because so that one party doesn't forget or you remember, like you have accountability in that way. But absolutely, yes, like having that middle person, I mean, I would say call them a mediator, call them a negotiator, not a lawyer. And I was no offense to you as a lawyer, but I feel having gone through this process, I do not regret like that I didn't rely on a lawyer to negotiate all of that. I feel like that it's just a very different idea to having a neutral party kind of go between. That's just my feel of it. Like yeah.
And meanwhile, all family lawyers out there dying on the
No,
inside.
I know. No, they can file the paperwork. Like I was okay with them doing that part. Like I want to be really clear, and everyone's different. But I would say that when the communication, like this is all communication in my mind, and once all that paperwork is done, guess what? We're still having to work on people is communication, right? I think it's a little bit easier if you don't share a human being or human beings. But if you have to co-parent or you've agreed that you're going to share the children, sorry, dude, you're going to have to figure out how to communicate. And that is key, right? That's the hardest thing.
But yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had a lawyer do the filing.
Yeah.
And I guess, did he have a lawyer as well?
No, we actually decided that we were going to use the same lawyer to file.
Okay.
Oh, actually, I'm not entirely sure if he got it. You'll have to ask him.
Okay, no, it's fine. I love how you've disassociated.
I don't know what he was doing, obviously unbeknownst to me, but we filed like the paperwork with
one lawyer.
One
no,
lawyer.
But that's
yeah.
Procedurally, that's correct.
Yes,
Only
okay.
one lawyer can file the paperwork.
You find out next week.
So, no, but let's go back to this. I do want to say a little piece on mediation because I am a mediator and I was a lawyer. Yeah. So I understand the nuances of family law.
Yeah.
But I can understand that in your case, the mediator you chose wasn't versed in family law.
Yeah.
But they were someone that both of you trusted.
Yes.
And the engagement wasn't necessarily official then.
No.
It was just someone you trusted.
Yeah.
That you both trusted and who both of you had a relationship with the mediator that enabled or facilitated this. Because I think a lot of people worry, oh no, now I have to engage a mediator and that's going to cost.
Yeah.
But the reality for your situation is that you chose to have someone who could go between the two of you.
Yeah.
Like a mediator, but not #officially.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I think what I'll say as well is, I think the initial instinct, right, when something like this happens is like, you have to go out and like talk to 5 lawyers and find your lawyer, right? And then that's going to be the person that takes you through this, right?
I told you not to.
You did, but equally, like that wouldn't have been my plan of action anyway. Mm-hmm. I think, and if that is somebody's plan of action, because maybe they don't have access to somebody who knows this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I would say tune into your instinct and your intuition. And I know, okay, maybe that's a little bit harder for some people, but if this person is gonna, like, you want to trust this person, you want to be able to have some kind of like,
you have to trust whoever your mediation negotiator is.
And I feel like for me, for whatever reason, I feel like if I had went that route of going to talk to a bunch of lawyers and having them be the sole, people, something about that just doesn't, for me, does not resonate. Like, whereas having a mediator, whether that's somebody that you pay or a divorce coach like yourself, right, who also legally has that ability to mediate, it has to be somebody that you resonate with, right? There has to be a human element to this, not just like a cold, like kind of lawyery. Am I explaining it right? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I understand what
there needs to be an
saying.
element of connection and trust, because this is a big deal. This is a big transition, and you want to feel like somebody understands where you're coming from. And yeah.
Yes, so your mediator makes you also feel seen and heard.
Yes, but they have to for both.
Yes,
I
for
think
both.
that's the thing.
Yeah,
that is tricky.
Above all, they're going to be a neutral person.
Yes.
Okay, so just to walk through the process and recap it for our listeners, that as between the two of you, you had Google documents that you shared and that you listed out your terms or issues, and then I guess each of you had a column.
Commenting.
And comments.
A lot of commenting.
I'm sure. And so then you were able to decrease face-to-faces or...
Yeah, I mean, look, we weren't having any face-to-faces at that point. I would say in the first year, from my memory, really very little. I mean, obviously we shared a human, so there was some contact there, but really we could not.
Yeah,
we
fair
could not
enough.
do the face-to-faces. We could barely do the real-time phone conversations or any. So it was bad. It was very, very challenging.
This is important for people to hear. And I
Yeah.
thank you for your honesty
Yeah.
with this, because again, a lot of people might think that I've decided it's going to be amicable. It means we can sit down and chit chat about it. And
Some people can.
And
I mean,
some people
God bless
can.
them. Like if they can,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But for the rest of us, I think it's hard. And
it's
again,
a conscious choice.
yeah. And when you put the emotion into it, like what I have learned is that trying to communicate and being very emotional at the same time is very challenging on both sides.
Yes. Iman,
We
totally
do
knows.
like a whole episode on that.
Would you say there were perhaps some ground rules as to your communications in that first year, or the 9 months and up to the first year?
I don't think that we, agreed, like both of us, on any of that. And I'm really trying to just kind of remember it, right? Because I think this is also the brain at work, where you're just like, you try to forget, things that no, it does. It's like self-protecting. But I think my personal rules for myself, right? Which is feeling like so much in that first year, I was still stuck in that dynamic of when we were in our marriage, and it was, kind of going through the final throes, and what that communication felt like. And it was very, very hard to do something different, especially because now you're negotiating something totally different that's going to change the course of your entire life and your relationship and how you show up with your child. So I think my personal rules were to remind myself that this person was going to be my kid's co-parent in the same way that I'm a co-parent. And so we had problems communicating before. Now, trying to work through these terms, of a divorce, and also work through how we're going to co-parent our child, we actually have even more of a motivation to communicate, ironically, right? Despite going through a divorce process. And our kid is young. I mean, I would remind myself, holy good God, like that's a lot of years that we're going to have to be communicating better, right? So did that help on the hardest days? Probably not. But I think always going back to that of, can I be proud of myself in this moment by how I'm communicating right now? Some days the answer is no. Some days you're communicating from that place where you're just a child, or, all of that. It gets very emotional. The other thing is always reminding myself that this is my daughter's father. And while many things may have happened or not happened, he is part of the reason why she's here. So I have to respect that. Like on the hardest days, and I go back to this, when you talk about kind of what are the rules I have for myself? Like some days in that first year were awful. Some exchanges, a lot of exchanges were truly awful, right? And I'm sure, when he sits down, maybe he also could say that. But I would always remind myself that no matter how I felt about him in that moment, and he's not a bad person, by the way, I want to make that very clear. I always remind myself that she is half me and half him. And for me to feel very strongly negatively about him almost feels like I am feeling very strongly negative about her, because she is half and half. And that would, on the worst days, I would hang on to like white knuckle, like hang on to it and just be like, just remember, she is half of him.
Did you write it on a Post-it?
I had so many quotes that first year that I go back to. But, everyone's going to find their thing, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like the North Star, right? Like when you are really like just like on the edge, right? On the edge, and you are like literally your worst self. What is going to bring you back from that, right? So,
Yeah. You have to
I don't know if that's helpful for anyone. Guys, it's hard. It's hard.
I really like it. I really think that you've done a lot of reframing in the conversation that we've had so far. Like, first of all, rather than describe divorce as failure, which a lot of people do, you've reframed it as growth.
Yeah, it's an experience.
Right? So
There's
you've learned
lessons.
from this experience.
Yeah.
And then looking at, the difficulty in communication, the way you kept yourself anchored. For you, for this case, your mission statement was to say that, that my daughter is half him.
Yeah.
And she's everything. So I will
it's
rein
also
myself
respect.
back.
Yeah, it's also respect for the other person. There's also another human being involved in this, right? And I feel like for me, having empathy on the worst days, and again, I'm not trying to paint myself as this like great person who's just like, and then the heavens open up and whatever, everything is rosy. No, like there was some moments that like when I look back, and was I proud of myself? No. Was I really struggling? Yes, 100%. But always trying to remember there's another person involved in this situation who also has emotions, who is also feeling it the way that they're feeling it. That's not wrong. It's just their perspective. Sometimes it feels unfair, but equally, there's another human being involved. So, how can I let go of this stuff? How can I also realize that I can only control what I can control? And that is me, true of everybody. You can only control yourself. So at the end of the day, certain things suck, but what are you going to do about that? Are you going to learn the lesson and try and then let it go? Take the lessons, let it go. That's another one that I really like coming back to. Or are you going to try and, like white knuckle it? Sometimes you do have to fight for certain things. And there were certain things that I think had to pick my battles, right? Learning truly what is the most important thing for me here. There's maybe 2 or 3 things that, okay, like I learned to hold a boundary, right? That was a big growth and learning point for me in this post-divorce process, is like how to hold boundaries. But you have to pick your battles. And you have to do that based on what is really, really, truly important. And even then, you have to do it with some finesse and some grace and all of that, because it's prickly when you're dealing with somebody who, it's like building a whole new relationship with this person that you've just ended a relationship with. It's like a different kind of relationship.
So if, as you say, some days are better, some days are not as good.
Yeah.
And that's normal for everyone.
Yep.
But if there was a day that you needed a little bit more time or space, or if he did, how would you communicate it with each other if you did? Or how would you manage it?
Do you know what's so funny?
You didn't?
No. No, I think we both kind of, if I'm remembering correctly, and then I'll share the funny thing, is like, again, those exchanges would get very heated, right? And a lot of this was over WhatsApp, or, it wasn't necessarily us talking in real time, because that was very difficult, like for a long time. I think we would kind of just like stop replying to each other, and it would just be like, okay. And I think, and probably it was you actually that taught me, just
sometimes you don't need to reply.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I almost needed permission for that, right? Again, everyone is different, but I think sometimes, yes, you do need to just have time and space. And if nobody's dying, right, it's not a decision that needs to be made right now, then okay, just give it time and space. But this is the funny part, is that my best friend at the time was also going through, a rough time. And she basically would just be like, please don't do this. But she would be like, just let him talk, just let him all of it unload, and then just write back, thank you for sharing, and then just be silent. And it used to crack me up every time. I didn't really do it, but she's pretty funny. I don't know. Maybe try that. Thank you for sharing.
I would say that probably works for some people. And
it's a bit passive aggressive.
It is. But I think that sometimes out of the many different options of reply that you could choose, that might be lower damage versus another option that is higher damage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, and that's what it is as well, right? And again, this is a learning it's literally relearning how to communicate, I think, when these times are hard. And then, there's another transition point, which I feel like we're on right now, where we're going into year 3, where it's a completely different communication style, completely different relationship. We're still working on it, but I would say like we're in a place now where it does feel very neutral. If I had to put a word on where our communication is now compared to where it was, it's neutral, right? So it's not really emotional anymore. And I think I personally can tell when it's starting to get emotional about certain things. And then I know now how to do things differently, right? But that's based on time and experience. Like it's
Everything,
a journey.
everything.
A journey.
Everything takes time
Yeah.
and experience.
Yeah. Well, do you know what I want to share? I edit this out if you think it's not the right thing to share, but one of the things that you told me very early on in the process that helped me put things into perspective was actually when I was deciding, what was important to fight for, right? And I think this whole idea, comes into place of what is fair, right? Everyone has an idea of what is fair for them, whether that's finances or the kids or the whatever in the situation. But here's the thing. The other partner, right, that you're in this with also has their idea of fair. And rarely, I think I've found in all the conversations, does that ever look the same? And then what you basically told me, I think, particularly when it comes to finances, was, what do you want more? Do you potentially want to, fight this to the death? Or do you want to be content with XYZ, even though you may not feel it's fair, but walk away knowing that actually this is the price of your freedom?
Yeah.
It was like about thinking about worth and about when that came into my head, like this is the price of my freedom. And so I could have this path or I could have this path. And let's be clear, nobody ever knows like what that's going to be, right? You can't predict the future. But to me, it was so clear. And to me, it was like, I just want to start a new chapter, right? And that's the price of my freedom. Can I be okay with that, right? I think that's the next question is, if that is the path that I choose, can I sleep better at night? Like 5 years down the road, when I'm looking back on this, can I be proud of having walked away from certain things? Can I, parent my child and have her grow up and ask me the question, like, why did you do this? And can I be proud of telling her why, right? But for me now, 2 years on, yeah, I would say that with that one piece of advice that you gave me about, you know what, like things may not seem fair, but you get to choose like how this goes. Thanks for
That's
that.
my review. That's my 5-star.
5-star
Five-star
Google review.
To be fair, this is something that I do eventually speak to with all of my clients.
Yeah.
And that is to say, well, sometimes what would you pay for this to go away?
Yeah.
Sometimes you do have to choose between being right or choosing peace.
Yeah.
And as you say, absolutely, it's also in 5 years, can you look back at this?
Yeah.
What is the story that you're going to tell yourself? And how are you modeling it for your child? If you have children, how are you modeling it? Because this is also you showing them how adults do conflict.
Deal with things. Yeah. And I would say that's actually been a huge motivator. I think personally, having grown up, not really, having had, I would say, good models of conflict resolution in a way that I feel like is what I would want to replicate. And so for me, honestly, in this divorce process, it felt a bit like breaking a cycle, a lot of cycles actually. And that's what I've worked on over the last, 2-3 years. But definitely always thinking about modeling, because we know that children do not learn from telling, they learn from example. And so showing her that if two people, if she's in a relationship in the future, right, God willing, she doesn't get to that point, but to show her that if something is really, really not working, there is a way forward. And yes, it may not be easy, but is it worth it to have then two people who are at peace and satisfied? I think for me, the biggest driver is always going to be peace. And that looks different for various people.
For sure.
But peace doesn't mean you're happy all the time. It just means peace. Yeah. The goal is not happiness all the time. And I would say that the other really important thing is, as you're going through this, acknowledge that it's going to be really hard. There are going to be moments that are going to be really, really, really hard. Try and have one or two people around you that can really, steer you in a better direction. And also just give yourself grace. Self-compassion is one of the things that I really had to lean into. And I think for a lot of people, that's very hard because we're very hard on ourselves. A lot of people feel like they've failed, right? And then they have to parent and then they failed the kids. And the kid's going to hate on them, like all of this kind of stuff, right? Yes, it's a process. But self-compassion first, like, gives you a little bit more capacity. It allows you to be sad. It allows you to be angry. It allows you to pick yourself up off the floor when you have had a terrible moment and you feel like you've just been a terrible person. You have to come back to some kind of love for yourself to be able to have some self-compassion. Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
For you, can you think of a particular instance of self-compassion? Like can you paint a picture of that?
Yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind, I think, because this hit me really hard, I think probably the hardest thing out of this was not being able to be with my child every day, right? So I always wanted to be a mom. Like, it never did it cross my mind that regardless of what happened, I would not be with my child every day. And I think there's that parental guilt of like, yes, going through a divorce, okay, that's great. I can have peace for myself, like in certain ways. We all adjust to this new routine where we actually have a great, very robust, stable setup. That was very important for us from the start, for our kid to have a stable setup for her. But I think the first moment where she turned around to me, and maybe the first time this happened was in the first year, and she was just like, why can't you and daddy just be together, or why can't I have you both at the same time? It was something like that, right? Something to the idea of, why are you guys not both here for me, right? And despite me, I would say I have quite a lot of perspective. I'm quite grounded. I knew this was coming in a way. Nothing quite prepared me for that. And when that happened, and I remember just kind of on the front, trying to work my way through the situation with as much grace and being as honest with her as possible. And then after she went to bed, just completely losing it, right? Feeling like a horrible person and guilty and all of that. And I would say that was, I had to really dig deep, right? To be like, this happened. Doesn't make me a bad mom. And she's going to be okay, hopefully. and just like, from that is compassion. That is self-compassion, because that is like one of the hardest things. And that's happened like multiple times at certain points. She's a little bit older now, and she currently bounces between us. In the first year, we bounced around her. And she does still say that from time to time. Why can't you guys be under the same roof? And it still hits me the same. And so, that's not the only time that I have to dig deep into self-compassion, but for sure, I think for any parent, that's always on their mind, about feeling guilty for certain things. And so being kind to yourself and just knowing that, we're not perfect and we're going to mess up. And even if you're perfect, you'll probably still mess your kid up, but it's okay to not be perfect. That has been a big learning point for me out of all of this.
When we had like our pre-recording discussion, you emphasized capacity. And let's talk about that. Because I know for sure that having capacity in divorce is really challenging. There are so many directions that someone's being pulled in. There is normal day-to-day life already. Then there is parenting, looking after a home. managing divorce stuff is like having another job on
Yeah,
top of
it
whatever
is.
you're doing in
Yep.
your daily life.
It's exhausting.
It's another thing to deal with.
Yeah.
How did you manage your capacity or find capacity? Because I think a lot of people would also want to hear how 9 months of negotiation, how did you keep yourself
Yeah.
balanced?
So I feel I actually brought a little. Do you mind if I bring this little prop out?
Yes,
I brought it
you
with
can do your
me.
thing.
Yeah, no, I brought it because as I was thinking about it, and kind of reflecting on how everything went, this is kind of what it visually I think feels like when I think about that first 9 months. Everything kind of like blew up, right? And this is really my nervous system and your nervous system too, probably. But it's like we're supposed to be here most of the time, and then we have stressors in the day, and it's kind of all over the place. But we want to go back to here. It felt like through the end of like going into that transition that was very difficult, and then it being very explosive, and having that transition, and then moving through that 9 months of negotiation. I felt like I was here, literally every second of every day, and then something else happened, or bad communication, or couldn't agree on a term, and it literally is like that. And when I think about capacity, that's what it feels like. It feels like emotional, mental, parenting, trying to not talk smack about the other person when you've just been through like something that day, but also don't want to appear that way in front of the kid, because I don't personally believe that that is healthy, and that was not how I wanted to conduct myself. But it's constantly here. And so how I got through it in terms of capacity was really trying to simplify. And what that meant was find something, like 2 or 3 things that could help me, even in the tiniest of moments, come back to here, even if it was just for a little while, right? What was that? For me, I actually found it through sound. So I picked up an instrument called a handpan, but I actually turned to sound and found it very, very intuitively healing. Also because I didn't need another thing. Like, I don't need to learn to meditate right now. I don't have capacity to learn something. I found sound very intuitive, and that could be listening to music. It could be listening to sounds of the water. I personally like going for walks. So when things got really tough, I would like try and find time to go for a walk. And, neurologically, there's a lot of reasons why these things help. I think what I'm trying to say is that I needed things that were easy to do in the moment, low to no cost, and would help me fit into my parenting and all of the other things, like very low hanging fruit. Some people, it's like coloring, right? Like it works in the same way in your brain and body, but things that you could kind of go back to here. Sometimes it would be a really big cry, like I'm a big crier. Sometimes it would be like anger and having to vent it. She knows from the time I was little, a big crier. But sometimes it's calling a friend, and literally all the things you want to say about that person right now, you say it to your friend, right? That's what they're there for. It's offloading. It's getting the emotion out. So how do you have more capacity? How did I have more capacity? Is by not holding on to things. The art of learning to let go, the art of learning to express emotion in and of itself can create relief. Maybe not for an extended time. Sometimes yes. But in that moment, I think it's learning how you can do these things to just give yourself a little bit, a little bit back. And then you might balloon out to here again the next day. And then you're going to make a practice of like figuring it out. And then slowly, I mean, I have felt now for like a year and a half probably that I'm baseline here. But I work hard on it. Like it's not easy. Like it's a practice. And I would say when you're going through that, and, I had a group of women last year that, I had a little divorce group, and I learned so much from them, and we shared, and we, held space for each other, is don't sit in your shame. I think so many people, are so ashamed, right? And I think it's ironically a real shame that this is the case, because so many people are going through this, like some way, shape, or form. And the feeling of shame and guilt around this is happening to me. I get it, right? You don't want people to know your business. I guarantee you there is a group of women out there that is going through exactly the same thing. You just need one or two. And sometimes, the stories are always different, but there's some kind of common thread there, right? And sometimes it may be, I'll be honest with you, when I had the group for a little while, I would hear other women's stories, and sometimes it would be like, holy good God, I thought I had it bad. You have it real bad. I actually feel a little grateful now, right? It's just, or you hear someone's and you can share something with them about what you learned or just have community. And that makes a difference. That gives you capacity. I remember so many times we would get together with friends or whatever and just talk it out. I feel this is a woman thing, right? Like when we communicate, something happens where we feel connected and stronger. And that's what gets you through this process more, I think. Find a couple of people, or it doesn't have to be a whole lot. We're all busy. If you have a couple of good girlfriends, great. Be wary of the friends who add fuel to the fire. The ones who will keep you in ruminating and all of that. So be a bit careful about that. But I think you have to empower yourself, right? The first thing is, how do you get more capacity? Find a couple, 2 or 3 things that you can do. That's crying, coloring, art, whatever, singing, sound. Again, try sound, I would say, because it's really intuitive. It could be music or an instrument or something like that. And just find what works for you. You don't have to come back down like right away, but just to find little points that you can give yourself a little break. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, in a way, I don't have a colorful thing. So I think of a pressure cooker.
Yes,
and how in a
exactly.
pressure cooker, you always need to let off a little bit of the pressure and the steam. And it's
Before it
just a small a
explodes,
little bit. And, the pressure will build up again. You kind of keep having to do that. But it's
a practice.
Right. Yeah.
It's a practice.
You have to be aware that you need to do that and find the thing that works for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
No worries.
Okay, I have just one last question. For someone starting this process who wants to have an amicable outcome, what is the first concrete thing they should do?
I would say, this is a tough one. I think of so many things, but I think it's to sit down with yourself and wherever you are in the process and whatever your situation looks like, is to get very honest with yourself that it is going to be a journey and it's going to be probably difficult, right? And that there are going to have to be things that you think are fair, that may not work out to what, and you have to be okay with that. that I feel like mentally,
that's huge.
It's huge. Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, you're asking me, right? What is the ideal scenario? You don't have to be calm. Yes, it's a mindset. It's 100% a mindset, because if you go in with a different kind of mindset, I feel like that still makes the process is going to be hard, right? This is just a different kind of, it's like choose your hard, right? Do you want it this way or do you want it this way? It's going to be hard. But if you can find the goodness in, going down that road, and you use those as your anchors, right? And I'm really talking about this as like a mental plan.
Yeah.
Because, your thoughts really are what guide you through this. I would say mentally sitting down and just telling yourself, yes, I want to choose the amicable route for X, Y, and Z reason. Those should be your values, your guiding stars, like what is most important to you. And that could be as simple as peace for myself, as soon as possible, or peace for my children. And then sit with yourself to kind of talk to yourself about, it's going to be hard, but there's something ahead there. So like, if you can just mentally prep yourself, I don't know, some people, it's going to take more than 9 months. If an amicable thing may take 2 years, depending on what it is that you are trying to negotiate or the situations. It may take 3 months for some people who are really amicable. Great. Like everyone's going to have a different scenario. I would also say it that when you're doing that ideation, that mental prep, is to be honest with yourself about what your resources are. Because so often we sit in the, oh my God, nothing's going to work. Like this is going to, and it does feel like that, right? Like the brain does kind of put you in that state, especially if things are really bad, which, in our state, I think it was very intense to begin with. Find a handful of things that are your resources. It's going to be different for everybody. Maybe it's a best friend. Maybe it's someone in your circle who can give you advice on something. Maybe it's the fact that you're really good at a particular thing. But figure out what your resources are. And that's kind of like your mental prep. And I feel like go back to that. Yeah. Every time you're faltering, go back to that. Have a quote. I don't know. Some people like you need some kind of like quote, right? But I would say it's the mental prep of just sitting down and saying to yourself, this is going to be hard, but I'm choosing this way because, and yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it is important to acknowledge that it is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key things you said is, you can do so much when you feel resourced.
Yes.
By contrast, if you feel like you're in this problem state, you absolutely can't solve your problems. But when you feel, and whatever being resourced is looks different for everyone.
Correct,
but when you feel resourced, you can absolutely meet those challenges.
Yeah. As best as you can. I mean,
no, it's not perfect.
Yeah, it's not perfect. And some days you're gonna fail. I mean, that's it. That's where the self-compassion kicks in. It's a process. I mean, but I think the most important thing to remember is that you're not alone. I wasn't alone. I felt alone a lot of times. And I think that's where it's just like, don't let the guilt and the shame and the loneliness of the whole process consume you. Go out and find those people. They are out there. Guarantee. It's not that hard to find.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so who wants to hear his side?
I'm curious. I want to hear his side.
Here's what stands out from Pudding's side of this. She didn't describe Amicable as something that happened to her. She described it as something that she kept choosing repeatedly, on purpose, even when the easier move would have been to stop choosing it. That's the definition worth taking from both of the episodes, that an amicable mindset in divorce doesn't actually mean friendly, equal, or trusting. It doesn't even mean conflict-free. It means the least harmful, most respectful, most workable process that's safe and realistic in your circumstances. If you haven't heard his side yet, go back and look for the episode. We're talking the same process, but a completely different vantage point. And between the two, you will get the fullest picture of what workable actually requires. And if you're figuring out what a workable process could look like in your own situation, that's exactly what I help people work through inside the Divorce Atelier. Thanks for listening to Divorce Actually. I'll see you next time.